Hey everyone, welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. Let's talk about the big Marvel Disney Plus Day reveals. We got our first look at a ton of shows, and some new shows were announced. I'm going to explain Moon Knight, She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, Secret Invasion, and all the other new announcements. So get cozy. We got a lot to cover. First, there's an extended look at Hawkeye, which debuts in just a couple weeks and is already getting pretty great reviews. The series is based heavily on the stellar Matt Fraction David Aja comic, which I cannot recommend highly enough to you. So that series basically shows what Clint is doing when he's not an Avenger. He owns an apartment building in Brooklyn, and he protects it from a consortium of gangsters and the tracksuit mafia. It's basically a bunch of guys that walk around saying bro all the time. In the comic, he also teams up with Kate Bishop, his Hawkeye in training, played here by Haley Steinfeld, who is likely going to be one of the Young Avengers. Now here and in the comic, she's the daughter of a wealthy family who has ties to organized crime. This is actually her mother here. So in that comic series, Clint goes deaf when his eardrums are pierced with his own arrows. In a previous trailer, we saw his hearing aids, but this trailer confirms that he has somehow lost his hearing.
I'm not hearing you. You drive, okay?
Now this car chase, when Kate wants to drive the Dodge Challenger, is a nod to the car chase that spans an entire issue of the comic where they drive a Dodge Challenger. The chase that makes up most of this trailer is lifted directly from that comic. Now notice the van says trust a bro because it's driven by that tracksuit mafia I was talking about before. So in the last trailer, we saw Kate Bishop fighting crime while wearing Clint's suit from Endgame, the one he wore while executing criminals. It appears as if these criminals are now after Kate because they think that she's the one who went around killing the other crooks. And now these criminals could potentially threaten Clint's family. So he comes out of retirement again.
I'm too old for this.
Now this costume is very similar to Clint's Ronin suit from the comics, which he wore during a brief time when he wasn't Hawkeye. We actually see Kate wearing the Ronin suit in this cellar, the same cellar where later on the wall collapses in an explosion. So all of these guys in the cellar in tuxedos and sitting in chairs. It makes me think this was some kind of illicit auction, another storyline pulled from the Matt Fraction series, and that Kate breaks through the wall like Kool-Aid Man and disrupts it. We also see an ad for the Steve Rogers musical, which we saw a glimpse of in the last trailer. Notice the tag of this is every Avenger brought to life, and there's a double meaning there. They were brought to life by the blip, but also brought to life on stage. Kate says,
"When I put that suit on, I thought, this is it. This is the moment I become who I'm supposed to be."
and Clint responds.
I remember the day I thought the same thing.
And the trailer implies that this moment was the Battle of New York. And it's pretty cool to know that this is how Clint felt emotionally connected to the team, because we never really see him express that on screen. Now this shot is interesting, of two people fencing. I'm going to guess that this is Kate training with a tutor, maybe with Tony Dalton's character, the swordsman. In the comics, the swordsman trained Clint how to use a bow and arrow when he was young. So this shared connection between the swordsman Kate and Clint could be what leads Kate to imitate Clint's life as a hero. And this shot of Kate wearing the Ronin suit, doing flips, and saving Lucky from being hit by a car is also lifted straight from the comics. So this chase is through Williamsburg and Dumbo, and they're headed over the Manhattan Bridge, which is also featured on the poster for the show. This trailer ends with Clint showing Kate how to do his Hawkeye arrow swing from the Avengers and land on top of a train. Now the series is also going to feature Yelena Belova and introduce the anti-hero Echo, who might be this woman getting out of the limo here. In the comics, she was raised by Wilson Fisk, Kingpin from Daredevil, to be an assassin. She learns that he's evil, she rebels, and she kind of becomes a hero after that. Now this character must have made a strong impression on Marvel Studios because she's already getting her own spin-off series. Now there were a few other announcements that I am super jazzed about. X-Men 97, continuing the 90s classic X-Men series with the greatest superhero theme of all time. We also saw the official logo for Ironheart, about a young woman named Riri Williams taking over the mantle of Iron Man. In the comics, she does this with the help of a holographic Tony Stark, which could have been teased in Endgame. But I seriously doubt we'll see Robert Downey Jr. return to cameo in a Disney Plus show.
I love you 3000.
But that's not the only show that ties into Tony's legacy. The comic story Armor Wars was about Tony fighting to keep his armor's technology from getting into the wrong hands. Now this series will feature Don Cheadle's Rhodey doing the same thing, and hopefully we'll finally have the return of Justin Hammer.
And it's capable of reducing the population of any standing structure to zero. I call it the ex-wife.
There are two other new announcements that I want to go over before we get into She-Hulk. MarvelZombies, a continuation of the What If episode. Now, if you remember, that ended on the huge cliffhanger of zombie Thanos in Wakanda, which made no sense, but whatever, it was fun. Now, this could be set in the same universe, or maybe we'll see that zombie virus spreading throughout the multiverse like it does in the comics. Now, this Agatha Harkness spinoff was rumored for a while, and I am thrilled that it's confirmed. I can't wait to see a whole show from Agatha's point of view. We even have a video coming out soon about why Agatha was right, so subscribe and ring the bell so you can see that one coming. Now let's talk about the She-Hulk sneak peek. In the comics, Jennifer Walters is the cousin of Bruce Banner, and she's a really good trial lawyer. A gangster that she's trying to convict shoots her, and Bruce has to give her a blood transfusion to save her life. Next thing you know, She-Hulk. So, unlike Banner, she never really saw being the Hulk as a traumatic thing. She basically kept her own personality when she was transformed, and mostly stayed in Hulk form afterwards. Her comics have always had a lot of fun and humor, especially the stellar run by Dan Slott. So this trailer begins with her doing yoga and introducing herself.
I'm Jennifer Walters. I'm a normal lawyer.
And then we briefly see her in Hulk form wearing her costume from the Dan Slott run. I think this logo is a really cool design, showing the slash in the middle. Like these are her two halves. She's both a woman and a Hulk.
These transformations are triggered by anger and fear.
Now, this scene is interesting, where Bruce is experimenting on her. Actually, at first I thought, hey, who's that kid? But then I realized that the Hulk is so tall, it just makes Jennifer look like she has the height of a child. So notice that this is Smart Hulk with two good arms. So this takes place before Endgame. Now, it'll be interesting to see if this whole series takes place during the blip, because we haven't seen much of what happened during that time. But my guess is that it actually takes place after the blip. Otherwise, we're going to be wondering why Jennifer didn't help out against Thanos.
Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos?
So my guess is that Banner gives her the blood transfusion to save her life during the blip, but they try to keep her powers from manifesting until the series starts. That explains the yoga. It's keeping her breathing under control, like Bruce learned to in The Incredible Hulk. Now, this location is really interesting. This looks like it could be Banner's underground lab, like he created a place far underground in case the Hulk went crazy and escaped. In fact, in the Hulk's original issues, Banner and Rick Jones kept the Hulk at a place exactly like this. The cage also looks like it was made for the Hulk, so Banner could lock himself inside of it without fear of the Hulk escaping. The design looks exactly like the one that was built on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier in the Avengers.
It's an impressive cage. Not built, I think, for me.
I also think that he lives in this lab, judging by his casual pajama shorts. Behind Bruce, we also see the readout of a skeletal framework that is probably a live reading of Jennifer's body and gamma fluctuations. Now, the weirdest part of this was this moment.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Okay, so for you youngins, there was a popular TV show in the 1970s called The Incredible Hulk. In that show, Bruce's name was actually David Banner because, and I'm not making this up, the TV executives thought that Bruce sounded too gay. I'm really not joking about that. So in the show, David Banner was constantly trying to keep the Hulk persona at bay, and his catchphrase was,
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Now back to this moment.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Jennifer is dressed with the costume and hair right out of the 70s, and this Bruce Banner lookalike next to her is dressed like Bill Bixby from the series. It's even low res and at a 4:3 aspect ratio, like it was shot on videotape. So what is this? Is this a dream sequence? Does Jennifer's mind wander and she imagines scenes like this, kind of like JD on Scrubs? Or maybe this is showing the Hulk trying to break through her subconscious via dreams about a 1970s TV show. Now let's talk about Ms. Marvel, another terrific comic series that I recommend you check out. In the comics, Kamala Khan is a teenager who is a massive Captain Marvel fangirl. She comes from a strict Muslim household, which really gets in the way of her trying to keep a secret identity. She's actually an Inhuman, which is kind of like being a mutant. She's born with latent powers that can be triggered later on. Now, Inhumans did appear on their own show and were in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I'm really thinking that both of those shows were part of the Marvel multiverse, not part of like the main MCU canon, so don't expect Kamala to be an Inhuman. Now, you don't see it in this trailer, but her powers are that she is a shapeshifter. Now, in this show, she's definitely still a Captain Marvel fangirl. The first shot is of her looking at a model of Carol Danvers flying through planets. Notice this sign in the background says New Jersey Avenger Con. I love this. We've already seen in Far From Home that the Avengers have taken over movies and pop culture. Then there's Rogers the Musical and Hawkeye. Now we see art imitating life as fans of the Avengers dress up as the Avengers in an Avengers show. Now, I also thought it was interesting that Carol's mannequin is wearing her full mask, because she doesn't wear this at any point in Endgame. I had a couple of thoughts about this. One, that Carol was active on Earth for a while after the snap, and when she wore this mask. Or two, after S.H.I.E.L.D. fell, all of their files about the 90s Kree invasion were eventually leaked online. So there is footage out there that's public knowledge of Carol fighting off Kree warships. Kamala and her friend Bruno also have lanyards that read New Jersey Avenger Con, and she's even wearing a patch of Captain Marvel's insignia. Now her powers seem to come into effect for the first time at this con. The energy around her looks an awful lot like the energy released from the Tesseract engine when Carol got her powers. So it could be that they're connected in some way. Maybe she met Carol at a con, or she saved her life, and somehow Carol transferred some of her cosmic energy into Kamala. But I'm not sure. One of her main villains in the comics is a clone of Thomas Edison who looks like a cockatoo. Like I said, this comic is great. I think that if he's in the show, experimenting on teenagers like he does in the comics, then her powers are more than likely the result of some sci-fi experiment that he conducts. Now it's hard to see, but you can definitely spot a few Avengers cosplayers in this crowd. There's an Iron Man, Captain America's shield is in the background, we got a Kree up here in front, a Black Panther just behind him, and what might be a short-haired Thor. I definitely think we're going to see a few meta callbacks in the show, like maybe someone dressed up as Fat Thor, or one of the lesser superheroes signing autographs, like maybe Scott Lang. I also love that all the Avengers exploits are basically public knowledge, like we saw in WandaVision.
She could have taken out Thanos on her own if he hadn't initiated a blitz.
Well, I'd argue that Captain Marvel came close.
Now this shot of her in front of the mirror is showing off her cosplay Carol costume, but notice that the shoulder pads are drawn on. But when her powers go into effect, they become three-dimensional. This is her shape-shifting powers manifesting subconsciously. She imagines that her shoulder pads are real, so they become real. I like that this explosion in her school is next to a sign that says cheerleading is a blast. It's a joke, but also it tells a story. Kamala isn't the type to become a cheerleader, but she has a blast in other ways. Later on, we see an explosion at the Circle Q Diner, one of her hangouts in the comics. The trailer ends with her friend Bruno trying to psych her up to fly.
I got this, right?
Totally.
Now I'll bet you dollars to donuts that this does not work, and she starts to fall. But in the next shot, we see a reflection gliding by, because as a shapeshifter, she probably creates wings for herself. She also starts off by imitating Carol's costume and appearance, just like she does in the comics. So before we get into Moon Knight, I want to touch on Secret Invasion. In the comics, this story is a massive crossover about the Skrulls invading Earth after taking the place of several heroes and villains who were in positions of power. Now, in the MCU, the Skrulls are good guys and refugees, or are they? It would make sense if some of the Skrulls had ulterior motives and were launching an invasion of Earth. This is actually symbolized by the logo transforming into Skrull green. We also get this shot of Nick Fury, no eye patch with a massive grizzled beard. So the last time we saw Fury, he was on a Skrull ship on vacation in the Far From Home post-credit sequence.
Everybody back to work!
Now I did a whole video theorizing about when Fury was swapped out with the Skrull. My take is that it was just after his last appearance on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so the Fury in Age of Ultron is a Skrull. After all, he cuts his sandwich diagonally and...
A toast is cut diagonally, I can't eat it.
So here's my thought. What if the Fury that we see in Far From Home, the one giving Talos instructions, was not actually Fury? What if he was an evil Skrull pretending to be Fury on vacation, and all the Skrulls on this ship are also evil Skrulls about to invade Earth? Then this Fury with the beard is the real one. He's been in a Skrull prison for years. Okay. Now let's talk about Moon Knight, the weirdest character in this whole MCU slate. Here's the TLDR on Moon Knight. He was originally a mercenary named Mark Spector, who's on a mission to Egypt, he almost dies, and then encounters an Egyptian god named Khonshu, who is like, "I'll let you live if you become my avatar on Earth." So Mark Spector creates the identity Moon Knight. But he also creates other identities for himself. Under the name Stephen Grant, he turns his mercenary cash into a vast fortune. He also works under a street-level alias, a cab driver named Jake Lockley. And even later in the comics, he wears a suit and gloves and calls himself Mr. Knight. We actually see a brief shot here that could be him as Mr. Knight. Now the reason I'm telling you about his identities is because Moon Knight does not have a firm grip on reality. The multiple identities have given him schizophrenia, and he's not sure which of his selves is his real self. The trailer begins with Mark Spector waking up from a dream, maybe a dream where he was fighting crime as Moon Knight. This could be like Fight Club, where the narrator committed his crimes as Tyler Durden while he thought he was sleeping. Then he gets out of bed and sees multiple reflections in the mirror, reflecting his multiple identities. The reflections stay behind to insinuate his fractured mind and schizophrenia. In the next shot, we also see him looking in yet another mirror, showing two different reflections, his main one and the small one off to the side, like he's more sure of who he is, but some doubts still linger. Then we see him in a storage facility all confused, like he doesn't know why he's there, or he's looking for something. Later we see him run away with a bag, like he's all excited. My guess is a big part of this show is Mark trying to find who Moon Knight is and how he's connected to him. So he discovers some of Moon Knight's gear in this facility and he's really excited about it. So it's like he's investigating himself, like the movie Memento.
Remember Sammy Jankis?
For instance, on this bulletin board there's a flyer for an ancient Egypt exhibit in a museum. I mean, it could be that Mark Spector never actually went to Egypt, or he starts to doubt that he did. Like maybe he saw this flyer and invented this whole scenario for himself. Then we have this slow tracking shot into this bathroom to show him beating down some thug. In the comics, Moon Knight is a dark, violent anti-hero. This could be Disney Plus going darker, more along the lines of Marvel Netflix shows like Daredevil and Punisher. We also hear two voices.
I can't tell the difference between my waking life and dreams.
The voice in your head.
Hinting at least two different personas. One is Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight, and the other is the more meek character, Mark Spector or maybe Stephen Grant. And we also see him executing a three-point landing and jumping across buildings in London. So for this shot of him running over the bridge, again, we see a reflection, another opportunity to show us his fractured sense of self. It's also important that this is at night, and the reflections in the water. Water is a symbol of emotion, of hidden depths, just like this identity is hidden in the depths of Mark's consciousness. Some people call Moon Knight Marvel's Batman. There are similarities, billionaires without powers beating up crooks, but Moon Knight doesn't work with any kind of not killing code. He kills. He hunts supernatural characters like Werewolf by Night, and he's so insane that even he can't predict what he'll do next. Like the tag at the end, when Oscar Isaac seems surprised that he's beaten up these guys on the street. The trailer ends with him looking at the camera, as if he's surprised to see us. Because think about it, if this guy did see past the fourth wall, if he saw us, then, in the world of the MCU, that would make him insane. If you knew someone who was walking around constantly narrating and acknowledging a camera that wasn't there, you would think they needed serious medical attention. But let me know which show you're most excited for down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.